1, 2, 3, 4!
Hello, world. This is Chris Aballo's podcast experiment, and I am Chris Aballo. Welcome to the show. Thank you for subscribing to the show wherever you get your podcasts, and also on YouTube, where you can get video episodes every Monday, except for this one. This is an audio-only episode, but we'll get to that in just a moment. Thank you for also following the show on Instagram, TikTok, at Cape Pod. Very much appreciated. Video clips going up basically all the time, almost every day. Well, weekdays. Let's put it that way. Weekdays, you can catch a lot of video clips. And this week, there will be some recent clips from the 2023 run thus far. Because, as I said, this is an audio-only episode. And why is there so much environmentally going on? Like a helicopter taking off. And wind and environment. Well, I'm recording this episode in New York City. That's right, the capital of the world. I am actually facing the Hudson River, just above Hudson River Park. My thought was to do this episode while walking the streets of Manhattan because, number one, everybody's either crazy and talking to themselves or they're wearing AirPods and they look like they're talking to themselves. So I basically blend in with everyone. But it's kind of a landmark day, and if you follow me on Instagram at Chris Sells Out, then you may have seen my post because I'm recording this on May 18th, 2023. And 20 years ago, that night changed my life, certainly the course of my life, and I want to tell the story of that. And I hadn't really planned on it until today. I happened to be in the city today for something else. And it only dawned on me last night, oh my God, tomorrow's the 18th. Wow, it's been 20 years since the Yellow Matter Custard concert. And I'll get into exactly the details of that, but because it was such an important night and because I was in the city, I said, oh, you know what? Because I'm feeling all these things. I mean, granted, I had an episode planned. There's an episode ready to go. Myself and the great Ming Chen sitting down, doing an episode together. Him talking about the convention circuit and everything else he's been up to. Adventures in Dubai and Hawaii, going to these conventions. Lots of good stuff. So that'll go out next week. That's Cape 226. But that was ready to go for today. It was going to be 225. But I was kind of not emotional. And I don't want to say the feels, because I'm too old to use that expression. No, I'm not going to call it the feels, but I was just kind of moved today thinking about this. And I've talked about it in bits and pieces over the years, but I thought, well, let me actually explain it. And rather than going home and recording this in my home studio, I thought, well, hey, ambiance. I can tell the story in the city where it happened, and you will hear the sounds of New York City. The sights and smells, well, you'll have to leave that up to your imagination. But I thought, well, this will be fun. I'll record the episode on my phone. I'll do the best I can to make sure that the sound quality is ultimately as clear as possible. I was actually going to walk. I was on 9th Avenue, 10th Avenue, but frankly, it was too windy. It's actually unusually cold. It's 52 degrees tonight, which is weird because it's going to be June in 2 weeks. So it is unusually cold, and the wind didn't help. Granted, I'm fine. I'm always wearing a leather jacket, so I'm cool. But it should be noted that's unusually cold. But the wind was really the problem, and I said, well, no one's going to listen to me talk, first of all, for this unplanned, spontaneous solo episode, but also if it's windy, that's just going to be annoying to listen to on headphones, in the car, regardless. Granted, this, I don't know what that is. Is that like a power washer? Or is that a helicopter? Did the helicopter that took off land? I have no idea what's going on. But I thought, for the sake of capturing everything I'm kind of thinking and feeling on the day when I'm feeling it, I said, you know what? Let me just record this on my phone. Fun fact, before we get into the main story, as it were, the main subject of the episode, because I don't think I've mentioned this, but the original Cape 101 and Cape 102 recorded at the end of 2016, beginning of 2017. I don't exactly remember which one. I remember the time frame, but I don't remember exactly when I recorded them. Oh, it's another helicopter. Okay. If you're wondering, that's another helicopter taking off. Those were actually recorded on my phone. They were very intimate episodes where I was kind of looking back on things, and I was home for the holidays. Yeah, now I'm walking again just for the sake of getting away from some of the noise. I mean, if you've ever been to New York City, or the city as we call it, then, there's no escaping the noise. But I thought, well, let me move a little bit, and then hopefully things will quiet down. There's a bit of a breeze, though, so I'll do my best to keep the volume of that down. The interference down, so this sounds good. Anyway, back when... So, Cape took a break after 100 episodes in August of 2016. And my thought was, well, I'm just going to stop for a little bit and then kind of regroup, and I'll start doing it again in 2017. Well, we started doing the only podcast that matters again at the beginning of 2017. Recorded those episodes during the holiday season while I was home, the end of 2016, beginning of 2017. So I thought, well, that will be my primary thing because we're going to launch that the first Friday of January. And then in February, I'll bring Kate back. And then just for various reasons, I didn't. But I recorded 2 episodes on my phone. And the reason I was inspired to do that, fun little fact, that was around the time Michael Rappaport started recording his podcast, the I Am Rappaport Stereo Podcast. And he would do some episodes sometimes that were like 20 minutes, and he'd record them on his phone, like while he was sitting in LA traffic, which was hysterical because I was living in LA at the time. So you're hearing people's horn honks, and he's, heckling and yelling at other drivers. It was actually pretty funny. But I think he did maybe 2 episodes a week. And I thought that's kind of cool because he's just doing the show he wants to do. And if he has something to talk about, he's going to talk about it. The episodes are 23 minutes. Cool. If he does one with his friend or, a guest or something like that, then, and they're 45 minutes, that's cool too. So that was actually my thought for the next phase of Cape, starting at Cape 101. I thought, I'll just kind of do whatever I want and figure it out because I don't exactly know. So there actually are 2 episodes sitting in the vault, the original Cape 101 and Cape 102, recorded on my phone. Myself and then my friend Dan drove past our high school, Lakewood High School, for the first time, literally since the night we graduated, and some thoughts on that. So this is the first episode being released that was completely recorded on my phone, just to capture the moment. Okay, so let me tell you about the exact event from May 18th, 2003. B.B. King's Blues Club and Grill on 42nd Street, New York City. So there was the Modern Drummer Festival that was happening out in... Okay, I don't remember where it was. I don't know. I'm not a drummer. But Mike Portnoy, a former drummer for... Well, at the time, he was current drummer of Dream Theater. Now, former drummer of Dream Theater. Also drummer for the Winery Dogs and like 19 other bands, which I'm sure are at various levels of being active. He put together this Beatles tribute kind of all-star band to play this concert. They were going to play at the Modern Drummer Festival, but they booked a club show so the general public could come check it out. Essentially for fun. Now, Dream Theater was one of my favorite bands for a while. And he was joined by Paul Gilbert on guitar, who, at that point, I knew from Mr. Big. And all I really knew of Mr. Big for a long time was To Be With You, because that was the hit single. That was the song that got played on the radio. So that's what most people to this day still know Mr. Big for. It's just this acoustic song, which is crazy because they're one of the most technically proficient bands to come out of the 80s. And they're known for essentially an acoustic ballad. It's ironic. So it was Paul Gilbert on guitar, and everybody did vocal duties as well. Neil Morse, who was keyboard player and vocalist for Spock's Beard, who went on to a solo career. And Matt Bissonette, who is a bass player, kind of a session player, who's played on everybody's records. If you own a rock record from the 80s, then Matt Bissonette played bass for sure. And they all sang, the 4 guys all sang, just like the Beatles did. And it was just a full-on 2-act with an intermission Beatles tribute show. So I had reached out to 2 of my friends who I had actually gone with them. I don't remember how they were interested in going to see Dream Theater. Back in March of 2002, I think it was the first time Dream Theater did an evening with Dream Theater at the Beacon in New York. And they did 2 nights. We went to the first night. Now, one of those nights, notoriously, or not notorious if you haven't heard about it, but for the encore, they played the entirety, the whole album of Metallica's Master of Puppets for the encore. That was night 2. We were there for night 1, so we weren't there for the night when they first did that. Alas, I don't remember why it was they decided to go, unless maybe I let them borrow some CDs or something. But myself and 2 of my friends, husband and wife, decided to go see Dream Theater. They were way entertained by Mike Portnoy, in part because he had a plush animal, as an animal from the Muppets, and the Electric Mayhem. Yes, I've seen Muppets Mayhem on Disney Plus, and I loved it. Highly recommend it. If you haven't watched it, watch it after you finish listening to this episode. Okay, don't turn this off and go watch it. Okay, that can wait. This is shorter than that. That's 10 episodes. So this is one episode. Get through this with me. Enjoy this ride, and then go on a ride with the Electric Mayhem, so to speak. But they were way entertaining, and he honestly is one of the most entertaining drummers to watch. I love Mike Portnoy as a showman, and he's also just one of the best drummers. I mean, now that Neil Peart from Rush has passed away, he may be the greatest living drummer, in my opinion. Obviously, it's all subjective, but I think he might be the greatest drummer alive. But they loved it, and obviously the band was way technically proficient, so they did enjoy the show. But they were intrigued by, he's doing a Beatles tribute show? Because the husband of this couple, it's another helicopter. I hope this is amusing rather than annoying. I hope you're listening to this and thinking, well, it's kind of funny, because it's like we're out and about with Chris. He never does this. But it looks like one of the helicopters from Escape from New York or something. Funnily enough, here I am in New York, but it looks like one of those choppers, these black choppers that's like heading in, taking prisoners away or something. Where the ADHD is rampant. So they were intrigued by Mike Portnoy is a great drummer and way entertaining. He's doing a Beatles tribute show. They were all for it. And they weren't familiar with the other guys, except they knew, of course, of Mr. Big and To Be With You. But that was all they really knew of Paul Gilbert. So we got tickets to the show. We drove from Jersey. It was on I don't remember what day of the week it was. I think we all worked that day. And they drove in to the city. We parked somewhere up 42nd Street because traffic is traffic heading from Jersey into New York. We literally parked and just got up to street level just after 8. And I was hoping, because we'd seen definitely at least one other show at that club. I don't know if we'd been maybe twice, and we didn't know if we were going to be able to get in after showtime. So I actually called to see if the band was on, and they just started their first song. It was a few minutes after 8. So we're like, okay, cool, let's go. And we rushed in, and we got down there during I believe it was the 4th song, She Said, She Said. And after that, they kind of introduced the band. Mike Portnoy introduces everybody who's playing and talked a little bit about the show and what they were doing, and it was cool. Now, the last song of the first set was an incredibly faithful and just unbelievable cover of While My Guitar Gently Weeps. Now, I knew Paul Gilbert was a shredder, obviously one of those fast guitar players, for those who are like, what the hell does that mean? Speedy guitar player, guitar pyrotechnics, like flashy, because in the 80s, that's what it was. Every guitar player was trying to play faster. That was the whole thing. It was not a gimmick, because you actually had to be technically proficient. So it wasn't like a special effect. You actually had to have the physical ability to play fast. So there was talent involved, as much as it's something people kind of shrug off. I think people get kind of snobby when it comes to that. But he's a bona fide guitar hero. And he does this solo for While My Guitar Gently Weeps. And aside from it being moving, I like it better than the original Eric Clapton solo. And I know people love that solo, so that might be blasphemy. But again, hey, it's all subjective. If you love that solo, bless you. But watching Paul Gilbert play this guitar solo live, which was, yes, flashy, but also moving and entertaining. Part of it he plays with his teeth, which was hysterical. By the way, so you can actually watch this concert on YouTube. I'm not going to put a link in the description because I'm sure it's not up there in an authorized way, but you can find it. Look up Yellow Matter Custard 2003, and you'll be able to find the performance. But he does this solo, and I'm so blown away by it. And the show was entertaining anyway, between the banter of the guys and the performances of the songs, because they weren't just doing like the singles. It wasn't like the Beatles' one album, with all the hits. They were playing some album cuts too. So there were a bunch of songs I didn't know, but it was entertaining as hell. But this solo just blew me away. And my friend, the wife of the friends who I went with, she was in tears at the end of it. Not like weeping, but she was so moved by it. She had tears in her eyes. And we were just blown away. And that was the end of the first set. But that, for me, was probably, at that time, the most amazing guitar playing I'd ever seen in person. And from there, literally from the the next day, started doing a deep dive on Paul Gilbert, from his solo material to Racer X, which is the band he was in prior to Mr. Big, a band he formed after he moved out to Hollywood with some fellow students from Musicians Institute. That name might ring a bell if you've heard me talk about that before. And I immersed myself in Paul Gilbert just as a player and as a guitar player who at the time was good. I mean, I started playing, we'll get back to my arc, but I'd been playing for a couple of years at this point. And I just thought, like, that, I want to be like that. I mean, my aspiration prior to that was I want to play as tastefully as David Gilmour from Pink Floyd. The guy never plays a wrong note. That was my perception. But I loved, obviously, the guitar players from the 80s and the speedy solos and the flashiness and all of that. But I thought I was not that strong of a lead player. But after seeing Paul Gilbert play, I was like, well, I want to play like that. I want to play like that guy, who also played a very flashy yet emotional guitar solo for While My Guitar Gently Weeps. And just witnessing that was like, oh, this is crazy. And also, one of those moments, mind you, this is long before smartphones. Well, not too long. It's like 4 years before the first iPhone. But back then, going to concerts, you thought, oh, I'll never see this again. So who knew? We didn't know if anyone was documenting it or if there was going to be any kind of release. Fast forward a couple of months, and they did put out a CD recording, a double CD set of the performance, and I listened to that solo endlessly. And then they put out, Mike Portnoy actually put out on his website an official bootleg DVD of, I guess it was the house cameras that were just running for the screens in the venue. And they put that out as a DVD. So I own the concert as well, which I've revisited a few times. And then because of, obviously, YouTube, some clips have surfaced on there because there's an actual release. And you can watch it on YouTube, but there's a digital video and audio are actually for sale on Mike Portnoy's website, which is pretty cool, which I would encourage. That's why I'm saying you can go look up clips on YouTube, but I'm not going to support that and say, hey, go do that. Don't pay the dude who's releasing it, because, hey, that's just how I am. So now, my story, which I haven't really talked about much as far as my time as a musician, where music was the primary, where the goal was to make my living playing music, to play guitar. That's what I was going to do with my life. I was going to play guitar in a band. That was the goal. So I started playing guitar. I've always said it's 16. Technically it's 15, because I laid away my first electric guitar, which is my first guitar period, and picked it up on my sister's birthday. It was actually September 22nd, 1997. So it was 2 weeks before I turned 16. And I remember that because we picked up on the way to visit her. My sister went to college at Rutgers. And we were passing by the music store on the way there. And I had enough money, so I said, well, can we stop and pick up my guitar, please? So the guitar rode with us, just on the back seat, laying on the back seat next to me, up to Rutgers. So that's when I got the guitar and started learning how to play. I knew nothing about playing prior to that. But I just always round up and say, I was 16 when I started playing guitar. And I was certainly closer to 16 than 15. And that was it for me. I just always had it in my head that, well, I want to be in a band. Or, well, not always. It probably started when I was like 14, 15, when I got the idea in my head about actually playing guitar. I've talked in many forms and many different ways over the years that, I got Bruce Springsteen's Born in the USA cassette for Christmas of 1985. And that made me want to sing and play guitar. I never did anything about it, but that was the first initial. As I've said, Bruce is the reason I started dreaming. That was the first wave of it. Was, I love this. I want to do that too. But the first actual endeavor was laying away a guitar and then taking lessons, which, well, my first foray into lessons was there was an acquaintance of mine who played guitar in a band. And it was the 90s, so it was a fairly, like grunge-influenced band. But not a whole lot of guitar players in Lakewood, New Jersey, circa 1997. So he had me come to his house one day, and he showed me how to play Wild Thing and the power chords for Black Sabbath's Iron Man. So I played the hell out of those songs. That's all I knew how to play. The 3 chords for Wild Thing, and then that main. Everybody knows how Iron Man goes. I'm not going to imitate it for you. I already look silly enough walking around speaking into my phone. I'm not going to do a lot like da 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 da. Okay, I did it. There. Happy? So, how was I going to take lessons? Well, I was 16, so I could work. And I was still mowing lawns and like shoveling snow and raking leaves and stuff like that. I was looking for a proper job, but nobody paid anything, and guitar lessons weren't cheap. And my parents didn't have the money for guitar lessons. That wasn't them being like stingy or anything. It's just that was just the domestic financial situation. There was not money for guitar lessons. I was able to earn enough money for a month's worth of guitar lessons, because you couldn't just get lessons a la carte. You had to pay for the whole month up front. So I was able to take a month's worth of lessons and learn how to play, You Shook Me All Night Long by AC/DC and a few other things. I think the riff from Crazy Train, I think I learned that. Some basic stuff that I wanted to know, because it sounded like actual music. Even though I'm sitting in, the basement playing it, it's a song. I knew it wasn't just sitting like strumming chords that didn't sound like much. These were songs that everybody knew, or at least songs I heard on the radio. So the fact I was able to play them, or at least bits and pieces of them, was a really big deal. The next step in my evolution was actually, if there are guitar players out there who are listening, in the back of basically all the guitar magazines in the 90s, there was the 6 VHS set of Metal Method by Doug Marks, which I, again, scraped together enough money because I thought, oh, this is months worth of lessons. I will buy this and teach myself, because they come with the sheets with the tabs, so you can actually read the lessons. I can play it back as many times as I want. Well, I can't afford lessons ongoing, but this will be hours of lessons. This will last me for months, and I will learn how to play a lot of stuff. I did and I didn't. I don't know that I made it through all 6 cassettes, if I'm being honest. I just don't know. The one-on-one learning has always worked best for me in everything. Actually doing it, having somebody sit there. I obviously excelled way more when I took private lessons, which I started doing on a weekly basis when I was earning my own money when I was 19, and finally had some money and took private lessons for the next 4 to 5 years. Made huge strides, because just to have somebody sit there and actually give you feedback, or even give you some suggestions, or correct your form or something like that, as far as your hand position and things like that, because those are things I had to correct anyway, because I wasn't just, I was making, my hands weren't in the most comfortable position, which made it more difficult to play, just to paint in kind of a broad stroke in that way. So anyway, I did have 2 or 3 bands, I think, in high school, between sophomore year, which is when I got my first guitar, and senior year. I had 2 or 3 bands, and then had another one going that I started up at the end of 2001, and we rehearsed. We never got out and actually played any gigs, because it was tough to get guys to commit to even rehearsing once a week. That was all I was asking. I mean, and it was the same in high school, honestly. And it's one of those things where I haven't talked a lot about my musical history on this show or on the only podcast that matters, because there was a lot of, I've touched on this part of it in as much as in saying that I haven't talked about it, that I've talked about. But there was a lot of bad feelings. There's a lot of disappointment, a lot of heartbreak, just a lot of things to where I kind of didn't want to deal with it. I didn't want to talk about it. I wanted to distance myself from it. And I basically did. 2012 was the last time I did anything musically, publicly. And I just said, okay, this isn't the primary anymore. Music is going on the back burner. That's it. And at that point I was, now 31 and didn't have the stomach to start another band. But what happened with this band, to take it back a little bit, in 2002, so I was working for a big box retailer, and I was closing that night, and this is about, like I said, about a year into rehearsing. Hadn't played any gigs. We had some original songs. We were also rehearsing a bunch of covers just so we can get out and play. That was the whole thing. Let's get a couple of songs together so we can go out and get in front of people. We'll work on some originals. We got some covers. We covered What I Like About You and Just What I Needed, and songs everybody knows that are popular. It wasn't like songs that maybe people would be ashamed to sing along to or something like that. But it was let's have a couple of covers. I thought, in 2001, Weezer's Green Album came out, so we did Island in the Sun and Hash Pipe. So we had a couple of current songs, too, that we were working on. But anyway, just rehearsed, never went out and played a gig. And so I'm closing this one night in late 2002. And I go on my lunch break, and I have a voicemail from the drummer quitting the band. followed by a voicemail from the bass player quitting the band. So the band essentially broke up by voicemail in one night. And it was like, great. Now what? Okay. And, the other guitar player was a little less reliable. So I was like, well, now I just kind of need to start over again. I wasn't sure about starting over yet again with another band. I wasn't sure what I was going to do. So I never, like I said, I want to be in a band. That was always the ambition for me. Now, the asterisk to that statement, I want to be in a band, is, and I've said this before, that I wanted to be essentially in Def Leppard, meaning a band like Def Leppard, where it was a bunch of guys. It wasn't one person out front. It wasn't Bruce Springsteen, the E Street Band, where it's Bruce Springsteen and his band, which is still kind of like being a solo artist. It was like Def Leppard, where it's 5 guys in a row. There's not one guy who stands out from the band. It's a band by definition and in action, so to speak, where it's okay. These are these dudes who play music together. They seem to all be friends, and the music's great. So that to me was the ultimate. That was my definition of wanting to be in a band. Now, obviously, time has shown that Def Leppard is in the incredible minority. They are a rarity in that their band that's number one is still around. Number 2 has had the same lineup for over 30 years at this point. And they genuinely are friends, and it all starts with that. But honestly, think about all the other bands from the 80s. I mean, Motley Crue's been around for 40 plus years, give or take. Not that they've always been active, but I mean, they have a founding member who just is no longer in the band as of recently. And there's tons of lawsuits. I mean, you can name most of the bands, particularly from the 80s. I mean, there's Rat and Queensryche and Great White and all these bands that have, had to go to court because of, well, who owns the name and who can actually tour using this name. And then, it's splitting up and bringing in, hired guns and all of that to replace members who quit, and, multiple bands touring under the same name with members from different eras. It's crazy. So that's not the actual, the actual band. So that was never so that was always weird to me. So that was always my ambition, was to be in that type of band. What I thought was a band, which is turned out to be a great example of a band. But unfortunately, my story is the most common in terms of musicians, where it's kept at it, kept trying, and things never worked out for a variety of reasons. So, that's truly, like, I'm among the majority of people who've tried to do this as a career. And I have made peace with it, of course, and I still play. But there's been a lot, which is why I haven't really talked about it, because there's just a lot of negative feelings associated with doing it. But anyway, to get back to what I was saying, I wanted to be in a band. I didn't want to be a solo artist, and I didn't want to be a hired gun. I didn't want to be a guitar player for hire. But at that point, I said, well, we're going to have to try something different, because these bands keep falling apart. I just don't know if I can do it. So I tried the singer-songwriter thing for a little while, and it didn't really fit. I tried it. It just wasn't me. And there's a friend of mine who was a singer-songwriter type, who I played guitar for him for a little while. We recorded a few things. I played with him live once at the Saint in Asbury Park. The last time I was actually at the Saint in Asbury Park, as it turns out. But none of it didn't feel like what I wanted to do. I still just wanted to be in a band. So I was not lost. I just didn't know where I was heading next in 2003. So fast forward to the Yellow Matter Custard show, and way impressed by Paul Gilbert. And I'm like, I just want to become like a crazy good guitar player. So that was the goal. I said, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to be an amazing guitar player. Now, looking into his history with his solo material, which I immediately got my hands on, and the Racer X albums, which I immediately got my hands on, found out he went to this place, GIT, Guitar Institute of Technology, which is part of Musicians Institute in Hollywood. Wait a minute, there's a school, like a music school. Because I had the thought in high school, I was going to try to get into Berklee College of Music in Boston, like so many, which is actually where Dream Theater formed. And honestly, I wasn't good enough. And my guitar teacher at the time, who I did take lessons for a little while from someone else in high school, I forgot. And it was the truth. He said, you're not going to you're not good enough to get into Berklee. And he was right. I can say, it hurt at the time, but that was the truth. I wasn't good enough to get into Berklee, so I didn't even apply. But then I thought, once I saw Musicians Institute, this is a program. This is a certificate. You do a year of, intensive music training, and that's it. Like, oh my God, if I just went to school for music, imagine how good I would be in a year. Focused study, specific to my instrument, not just going to music school, but literally going to guitar college, as I've used the term kind of jokingly, but it's the truth. It was going to guitar college. I said, wow, I could actually do this. This would be awesome. So I started looking into it, but it's still, California seemed like a completely different world. And I didn't know how possible it was going to be. It just seemed like, well, I want to do it. I just don't know how it's going to happen. Fast forward to November of 2003. I don't know if there was any reason for it other than they had fun doing the Beatles tribute show, but Mike Portnoy gets together a Led Zeppelin tribute show with, I don't remember who played bass and who sang, but Paul Gilbert played guitar again. And they had a show once again at B.B. King's. And I think they did a show I don't know if they did one in California or Canada or something. They did 2 dates it was called Hammer of the Gods. And these same friends and I, the 3 of us, got tickets to go see the show again. Actually, standing outside the venue, I saw Paul Gilbert while we were just waiting, in the line just to get in. And he was just kind of walking up 42nd Street and stopped to look in the window where the concert calendar was for B.B. King's. And he's just looking to see kind of who's coming through. And I saw him. I'm like, oh my God, there he is. And I'm like, Paul, Paul. And I'm shouting to him. And he turns and he kind of smiles and he walks up, puts out his hand and said, hi, I'm Paul. And I reached up. I think I've told this story before, but a lot of new listeners and people who may not know it. It was the one time I was nervous meeting somebody. And also the reason I said, I'm never going to do that again. Never going to be that way again. My friends were laughing at me because my hand was literally shaking as I lifted my hand up to shake his. And he's got giant hands. He's got like monkey hands anyway, which, certainly helps on the guitar playing front. But I was so like intimidated, and I don't even remember what I said to him. So I got to meet the guy who for the last 7 months I've been doing a deep dive on and just getting really into his music, and who was inspirational to me as a guitar player. And the show was good that night. It wasn't as good as the Beatles show, even though I was way more familiar with Led Zeppelin's music than I was the Beatles music at the time, or at least what was performed. I knew a lot more of the Led Zeppelin songs. But it wasn't the show didn't have as big of an impact, but there was a high bar to clear when it came to seeing these guys play again, do another tribute show. Leaving that concert in, again, this is November of 2003, I get a call from a friend of mine who I just happened to be looking at my phone. This one we had like Nokia phones or something, so, no smartphone. So, or maybe my phone was ringing, maybe it was buzzing, whatever. We went to, there used to be a Chevy's next door to B.B. King's. We were going there to eat after the show. And I see my friend called me and he said, oh, did you know that so-and-so died? I'm not going to say who, but it was someone I was very close to at the end of 8th grade and through freshman year of high school. And kind of had a falling out at the beginning of sophomore year of high school, which was a bummer. But her and I were close. We talked on the phone a lot. We actually exchanged Valentine's Day gifts. Even though it wasn't dating, there's a lot of like early, let's say, young boyfriend, girlfriend kind of vibes. But, it's not like anything. We never, you can't really date when you're 15 anyway. In as much as not autonomously. You can have, parents drive you somewhere. But that's not actually dating, at least as far as I'm concerned. I really don't think that's the same as, when you can actually drive and, go pick up a girl, something like that. I guess you get dropped off at the mall. We were at a bowling alley, actually. It's where we exchanged Valentine's Day gifts. But it was a group of friends, so it wasn't like the 2 of us getting together to go bowling kind of thing. There wasn't a lot to do in Lakewood. It was go to the mall, one of the malls, or go to this bowling alley, apparently. There wasn't a whole lot to do in the area where we grew up. Anyway, so I hadn't seen her even, obviously, since, high school graduation, but her and I hadn't been close for a while. And yeah, she passed away from obviously she deserves her anonymity, so I'm not going to get into it. I don't even want to specify what it is, but it's frankly is a disease that people don't necessarily pass away from. It's something people can live with, but for whatever reason, she did. And it was at the end of October. Her birthday was very early November. So she passed away about a week before her 22nd birthday. She was in her final year at Boston University. She was a violin player, and she was actually, I believe, first chair in the orchestra. I think, if I'm remembering that correctly, but she was part of the orchestra. She was on the dean's list, and she never got to see 22. She never got to graduate college. And, you know, at this point, around 2003, I was questioning, even when I'd gone to the show in May, because I'd started working this big box retail job in March of 2001. I remember being there for 2 years. And, you know, when you're 22, that seems like a long time. Oh, my God, I've been in this job for 2 years. And I felt kind of like, what am I going to do, you know, with the band falling apart? And I thought, like, well, I'm just working, and I'm not really getting closer to what I want to be doing. So what now? And then hearing this news about her, it just pulled things into focus for me. Well, I have to do it. I have to go to school. I have to go to GIT. I got to make this happen, because I'm doing nothing with my life, and hers is over. She didn't get to live hers. She didn't make it to 22. It really, and I refuse to even believe that she had died. I'm literally just in a daze at the restaurant and the entire drive home, until I went home and checked the newspaper from a few days before, like the previous week, and saw her obituary. And it was shocking. Like that, at that moment, it became real. As much as I was in a daze and didn't believe it, when I saw her photo and read her obituary, it became real. So much so that as a reminder, but also because, you know, it's someone I was close to for a while, very close to. I actually clipped it out of the newspaper, and it was on, I had like a bulletin board, a cork board in my bedroom that I had, you know, different things on, you know, stickers or postcards or pictures or whatever it was. I had that on there for, I don't think it ever left. It might still be on there. I'm sure that board is somewhere in my parents' house, but I kept it up there just kind of as a reminder of, well, you're still here. You better do something with your life. You better go for what you want, because you don't know. None of this is guaranteed. So it took a little while. I didn't go to visit Musicians Institute until June of 2004. So it was about 7 months later. My friend and I went out. He came with me because he was a big movie buff, and he just wanted to visit Hollywood. And we went, and I went on the tour of the school. I'd been in touch with one of the admissions counselors, and he gave me the tour, and we walked through, and it was amazing. And at the time, George Lynch from Dokken was there he was just doing private lessons. And I was like, oh my God, I could get one-on-one lessons, like guitar lessons from George Lynch. That'd be awesome. You know, this would be so cool. And my guitar teacher at the time was like, you better camp outside, like his office or whatever it is, so you make sure you get in and get lessons from him. So that began the process when I went out in June of 2004. Came home with all the paperwork, said, how am I going to do this? Had to do, you know, the internet was still nowhere near what it is now. So, you know, you can look stuff up, but like Google was still new-ish. I mean, the first time I heard of Google was like 2002 as like the search engine alternative to Yahoo. I mean, I knew people who were using Ask Jeeves at the time, which probably still, maybe it exists. I don't know, but I mean, we had a cable connection at the time. That was like a crazy like upgrade. Like, oh, you have cable internet? You don't have a modem, or you know, like a 56K modem or whatever it was at the time. I don't remember, but you know, you couldn't do everything on the internet. So I remember I was trying to find apartments and student loans and all this other stuff. There was just a lot that was involved in getting everything going. So it was a slower process because information was still analog. It wasn't all digital. It wasn't all accessible because, you know, through a device in your pocket like it is now. It was just a slower process. And it was a matter of, well, I want to do this on my own. I'm going to get student loans in my name, not going to have my parents co-sign, which was something that was, you know, doable at the time. It's probably was the last time in American history that was possible. It was 2005, 2006. Because I don't know that it is possible that anybody going to school, any student is able to get loans to the co-signer now. I just think we've evolved away from that, if that's considered evolution. But it was a slow process, and I got approved and accepted to Musicians Institute to begin the fall 2005 semester, quarter. The year was essentially divided up into quarters, 10-week quarters, with a week of exams at the end of each quarter, and then like a 2.5-week break. But I didn't have an apartment in place. There were no apartment rental websites you can just visit. The school mailed me in a packet, along with some other relevant details, apartments that were in the neighborhood that you would call to see if they had availability. So it's me long distance calling, which was still a thing, long distance calling all these places in around the immediate Hollywood area to see if they had availability. And I basically, the short version is, because the student loan process was still in process and I hadn't found an apartment, I delayed my start. And I said, I've been accepted. I contacted my admissions rep and said, hey, can I push back by 6 months because I haven't found a place? Because it could have been, because the way the quarters work out, it's still kind of like in 6 months was how they were looking at it, because it's like, well, you're kind of starting in, that way you're starting in spring of 06, since you're not starting in fall of 05. Like, those are the options. You can't really start in winter, because when they come back after the holiday break, that's like the second half of that semester, essentially. So it was like fall or spring was when you can start. So it was, okay, well, I could start in April of 2006. Spring of 06, I will start, which is great, because I said, good, I can get my student loans in line. Hopefully I could take another trip to California in the meantime and find an apartment, actually go visit places, which I did do actually in January of 06, and settled on an apartment, the first apartment I moved into. And that was it. March of 2006, got on a plane, moved out to Los Angeles. I wanted to get there a month early because I wanted to familiarize myself with everything. I wanted to settle in. I wanted to warm myself up musically, get myself, focused, practice, and get as much in as possible. Plus settle into living alone as well, and living on my own, which was a lot more than, I expected at the time, because you don't really know. Aside from the fact it's 3,000 miles away in a brand new place where I don't know anybody, and I mean I don't know anybody. It was a whole other experience on a lot of levels. But went to school, and as of March of 2008, I posted about it on Instagram a few weeks ago. March of 2008, 15 years ago, graduated from Musicians Institute. Ended up doing 18 months. After the first year, I took a 6-month leave of absence because I was able to qualify for California state grants, which meant I would have to take out less student loans. But they weren't going to kick in until I was essentially done with school. So I said, well, if I take a 6-month leave of absence, can I take full advantage of those grants? And they said yes. I'm like, great. It means I'll owe less money in student loans. I will wait an extra 6 months. So I was in school for 2 years. Only 18 months of that I was actually attending school. But I got an associate's degree, because after I got there, I said, oh, well, I could stay an extra 6 months and get a degree. I love this. I would love to do more of this than what I initially signed up for. But also, at least I could say to my parents, hey, I have a degree in something of some sort. That's cool, right? At least I have a degree. Yeah, I know it's a degree in guitar. It's actually occupational arts. But, it's a music degree, but I have a college degree in something. Isn't that great? And I do. I have an associate's degree in occupational arts. Yay for me. But it was an incredible experience. I met a lot of great people, had a lot of incredible teachers. I mean, guys whose articles I've read, guys like Tom Kolb and Dale Turner. I've been reading their lessons and, checking out their books and all of that since I started playing. Their lessons were in the back of the guitar magazines. And, I was learning how to play a lot of things from these guys. I remember getting the Guitarist Survival Kit, which was a book and CD set written by Dale Turner, and learning blues turnarounds and things like that. I actually learned a lot from these guys. And then actually meet them and befriend them was just wild. Lo and behold, in spring of 07, Paul Gilbert released his first instrumental album and came back and did one-on-one lessons with students. He had to get there at the crack of dawn. Actually, before, it may have still been dark. I had to line up because he was only doing so many lessons. But I got there and got a 30-minute lesson with the guy and borrowed my friend's camcorder, so I was able to film it. So I actually have this is how primitive this stuff was, well, at least compared to now. It was cutting edge in 2007, but I actually took the I think it was a VHS-C was the type of tape that the camcorder took. I brought it to Best Buy because for like a flat, like $25 or something like that, Best Buy would convert your camcorder videos to a DVD. So I brought this tape to Best Buy in Burbank and had the thing transferred to DVD. So I have the DVD of my guitar lesson with Paul Gilbert, which honestly I spent probably it was a half hour. I spent the first 15 minutes basically asking him questions that I just wanted to know anyway. So it was kind of like an interview, which I guess I can release as an archive episode of Cape, or at least part of it. Me kind of sort of interviewing Paul Gilbert, 25-year-old Chris Aballo, talking to Paul Gilbert, circa spring 2007. Maybe. It's possible. I'm recording episodes on my phone now, apparently, so that wouldn't seem too strange at this point. No, but that was incredible to actually sit and get feedback from the guy and jam with him. And it was incredible that he did it too. He actually made himself very accessible to the school and did a bunch of workshops in the performance space, on the stage and everything with his band, and would do meet and greets and was a constant presence at the school, which was awesome to have. Just that he was that down to earth and willing to give back to the school that he attended. That also gave him a career. Hoping I don't get a copyright strike for whatever's going on. Yep. It's the city, everybody. This is real live episode, different kind of live Cape episode. But anyway, alas, at the end of my time at school in May of 2008, moved back to Jersey because staying in LA was not sustainable. Now, basically all of this can be traced back to going to that Yellow Matter Custard concert, because ended up with a few steps in addition to actually attending the concert, but ended up finding out about the school, and moving to California, which opened the door to the LA Years Volume 2, and I moved back to California in 2012, which led to, the voice acting in the Cape. Cape was created in 2013 in California. This very show was created there and led to everything that's going on now. But the instance of going to school, moving out there and saying, I'm going to make a serious go at this, was the first time I really bet on myself and said, I can do this and I'm going to do it. And if nothing else, and my father said it to me actually when I graduated, aside from general congratulations, because I don't know that my parents completely understood it. You're going to do what? And you're going to get a job after that? Well, hopefully I'll be good enough to get a job. But he said to me when I graduated, I remember talking to him on the phone, he said, well, you said you were going to do it and you did it. And that felt good to even get that acknowledgement. I've never needed that acknowledgement or validation from my parents, but it was nice to hear that. And I did. I said I was going to do it, and I did it. Now, granted, through a bunch of different events. Again, music was no longer the primary, but that was the beginning of me doing all this. It's the reason I'm still doing this. Why you're listening to me now is channeling my creativity into something and saying, I'm going to do this. I'm going to dedicate myself to this. And if this is what it takes, if this is the level of investment, I'm going to do it. That's it. And this is really where it all started 20 years ago tonight. And it's just strange to think about. There's been a lot that's gone on in this time. It's oddly quiet, so now I'm feeling almost like somber because there's a red light. No one's honking at each other. There's no helicopters taking off or landing. But really just thinking about that, like, wow, 20 years. And I'm thinking back to 21-year-old Chris, and I think that's why I was a little stirred up by it this afternoon, because the afternoon of May 18th, 2003, I didn't know that night was going to change my life, that I was going to witness something that was going to inspire me to do more with myself or put me on some kind of track at a point when I felt like I didn't have a track. I didn't know what I was doing. I think that's why I kind of got stirred up when I was in the city earlier this afternoon and thinking like, I'm going to swing by BB King's, which unfortunately closed a couple of years ago. I believe it was pre-pandemic that the venue closed, so it's a shame they're not there. But I did stop by. If you follow me on Instagram, it's actually going to be in my 2023 highlights. If you see the story highlights on my profile, I took a picture of what's there now. It's part of it is a Target, and above it is Dallas Barbecue. No venue has replaced BB King's, but I did stop by and take a picture right around 8 p.m., which was showtime 20 years ago, just because, I was feeling a little, like I said, stirred up and sentimental and thinking, wow, 20 years ago, and thinking about all the stuff I've done since. And it's interesting, as I've talked about repeatedly on this show and on, some guest appearances that I've done on other podcasts recently, in as far as therapy and just the ways I'm approaching things and the ways I know myself and all of that. And part of that has been looking at, I was just talking about it in therapy 2 days ago. Or, no, I'm sorry, it was yesterday. It was yesterday morning. Wow. See, my sense of time sucks, and that's why 20 years has gone by. No, I'm totally kidding. But it was yesterday morning, and it was, my therapist asking me, what do you want to accomplish? Have you thought about what you want to do between, this summer, between now and Labor Day? Have you thought about it? And yes, I talked about that, and he said that to me. We've been going over that in a more expanded sense. What do you want to do in 2023? We talked about that in December. What do you want to do in your 40s? And kind of thinking in those terms, because look, the time is going to pass. I'm halfway through 41. 41's going to come and go. So 42, 43, I mean, as long as I'm still here, that's the idea. As long as I'm alive, yeah, those years are going to come. 2023, 2024, 2025. The years are going to come and go. What are you going to do with them? And it's interesting to think of the things that I've done in the last 20 years and how that concert kickstarted me focusing my creativity and actually setting a goal for myself and putting my money where my mouth is. Literally, it's expensive as hell to move to Los Angeles and stay there and go to school. And it's been 15 years, so I'm still paying those goddamn student loans. It's true, that's not a joke. There's a little bit of a balance left. Got to take care of those things. But anyway, it all started 20 years ago tonight. And it's no doubt one of the reasons you're listening to me right now. One of the reasons this show exists. And wasn't planning on doing this. Like I said, it kind of hit me this afternoon. And then I decided to post on Instagram to say 20 years ago, this Monday, Cape 225, I'll tell you the story about this concert and where I was. And, if nothing else, I mean, you probably at least have a passing interest in me if you're listening to this show. But the podcast is a document, and part of it is my life story. And where I am at these different phases. That's how I look back on the only podcast that matters. Well, that was us in our late 20s, early 30s, before everybody got married and had kids and all of that stuff. It's a moment in time. And to kind of look back on the pre-podcast, even smartphone. I mean, think about how much stuff we document now between photos and videos and even everything we post on social media. Like, we have all these documents. And this was a time when we weren't documenting everything. And I didn't know if I was going to be able to, experience this concert again. Lo and behold, it was recorded and filmed. So now I can experience it over and over again, but it's never going to be the same. So there was definitely more attention paid. We were more attentive back in 2003 because we were present. We weren't distracted by technology and, busyness. And hey, I was 21, so it's not like I got a whole lot of obligations and things going on anyway. It was just like, whoa, I'm going to a concert tonight. Awesome. Which was all I did back then. And try to get a band going. So it's pretty interesting. And by the way, the irony is not lost on me that I said I never wanted to be a solo artist, and yet here I am talking to you on a show that's named after me. That's essentially a solo project because my podcast equivalent of a band broke up. So this is my quote unquote solo career. The irony is not lost on me. That's how things are. But here we are. I'm glad things are where they are. And look, I still play music. I still play guitar. I still do some lessons, get some online courses and things like that, because it's still a part of me. It's something I've healed since the beginning of 2022 because I kept some distance between myself and my musical past. And I've posted occasional things, on social media, some occasional videos on like Instagram or TikTok, because I'm now kind of at peace with that. I used to, when I not gave up on music, but decided that wasn't going to be the primary, I, for the sake of my emotional well-being, I put some distance between myself and it, because I said, well, I don't do that anymore. And it was just a means of protecting myself emotionally. That's what that was. It wasn't, I'm not going to say it was unhealthy. Ultimately, it's something I had to heal from, and, some things I had to process and revisit and again, make peace with. And, I'm not sorry things have turned out the way they are. I'm happy the way things have turned out, because I would have done more than just play music anyway. All these other things, the writing, directing, all that other stuff, it would have been in me anyway. In fact, a piece of music that I wrote for my singer-songwriter friend, who I mentioned way back a while ago, who I play guitar with for a little bit, he actually had an album that he'd been recording for a while, and he wanted me to write and record some guitar parts for it. Kind of like, again, he was a singer-songwriter, but think of like the Eagles or Tom Petty. You know, there's a lot of cool guitar stuff going on beyond just strumming chords. And he wanted to add kind of some of that flavor to his album. But unfortunately, even though I wrote the parts and played them for him and he liked them, he spent so much time recording the album and it had taken so long that he decided, like, you know what, I just want to finish it and put it out and that's it. So unfortunately, he never used any of my parts. But some of the music I wrote during that time, I may be using it for this short film that we just shot back in March that I teased. So still doing some musical stuff. And you may get to hear it because it's a part of me. I'm integrating all the different parts of me, the writer, director, the podcaster, the musician, all of it. It's all part of this collective evolution. And it just seemed right to acknowledge this. And yeah, I could have gone home and kind of reflected and recorded this at the home studio and said, you know, well, this is me and this was a story. But I thought, well, let me capture it on the day marking the 20th anniversary of this concert. And while I'm kind of caught up in the emotion of everything, why not? Let's do it now. And I've done it. And I hope you've enjoyed it. You've certainly learned a little bit about me. And I hope it was worth it. And this is definitely an experimental kind of episode, you know, doing this thing literally out, walking the street, recording episode on my phone. But it was raw and honest and real. And I'm not going back and editing any of it. This is very, not stream of consciousness. Maybe off the cuff, I guess. But I mean, it's my story. What do I need to write it and make notes for and all that? I know what happened. I lived it already. So that'll do it. This is it, Cape 225. Thank you for listening. Once again, follow on the socials at Cape Pod, Instagram and TikTok. Look forward to the videos from other recent episodes this week. You can follow me on Twitter and TikTok at Chris Aballo, and on Instagram at Chris Sells Out. And subscribe to the show wherever it is you get your podcasts. If you're not already, please give the show 5 stars, a thumbs up, all of that good stuff. And I will be back next Monday with yet another episode. So until next time, this is Chris Aballo, and this was yet another experiment.